Today's daf we're going to be learning is Sotah daf lamed hey. We're actually coming close to the end of the Masechet. Our siyum, Be'ezrat Hashem, is going to be on Wednesday, May 17th. We're going to have the last daf, which is actually an incomplete full daf, so be prepared. And we're going to have a lecture from Dr. Tammy Jacobowitz on Sotah, Kedusha, and community healing. And very exciting, if that all wasn't exciting enough, Judy Farber, one of our learners, who's been learning with me for 7.5 years, is going to be doing a siyum hashas together with all of us. So that's going to be very exciting, and we hope that you all manage to attend. Okay, we will get started. That is Wednesday, May 17th, the usual time. The details are sent out by the invitation. You will see. Okay, some went out yesterday. There'll be more being sent out today by email, etc. Okay, here goes. Vayashuvu mitor haaretz. We were talking about the spies. So we're continuing along, darshaning the spies, and then we'll get back to crossing over the Jordan, then we'll get sidetracked again, and then we'll get back to crossing the Jordan. Vayashuvu mitor haaretz. So now we're talking about when the spies get back. It says something a little bit strange in the pasuk. Vayachu vayavo. So first it says vayashuvu mitor haaretz. They came back from spying on the land after 40 days. And then it says, and they went and they came to Moshe. Now that doesn't make any sense. It already said they returned, so we know they went, they came. Why does it say then, in additional, they went and they came to Moshe? So, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai, Makish halicha lebiyah. The reason why they said they went and they came is to say the way they went is the way they came, meaning, ma bi'ah be'etzara, af halicha be'etzara. Just like they came back, the bi'ah was with bad intent. They actually don't think they turned the wrong way in the middle. No, it was actually from the beginning that they already were planning to do bad things and already were going with a bad attitude, you could say, or more, their ideas started from the very beginning when they did their halicha, their walk to there. That's when it started. Okay, so now they say, you have to read the rest of the pasuk, otherwise it doesn't make sense. They said to him, we went to the land that you sent us. Get ready for this. And it's the lamb flowing in milk and honey. That sounds like what we would expect then, right? This is a good thing to say. So, and then they say, but the nation's very strong, and the cities are fortified, and we saw the sons of the giants there, and then they start saying all their bad lies. So, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Mishum Rabbi Meir, Kol hashon hara she'en bo dvar emet b'tchilato en mitkayem b'safo. This is like good advice if you want to get people to believe your lies. If you want people to believe you, you should start with a little bit of truth, and then they'll believe you, and then you can start your lies. Okay? I was thinking this is when people steal your credit card, this is immediately what got into my head. What do they do first? When they steal it electronically? So they start $2, $5. They do little things that they think will go through. Once they go through, then they start with the big money. So it's like a scam. This is very similar, right? Start off so that you'll be believed, and then you can get into the things that, are less likely they'll believe you in the beginning, but once you already have track record, it'll work. Vayahas, now we're going to see something a little bit different. Vayahas kalev ta'am el Moshe. In the middle of the spies speech, okay, we have, I'll show you in the Sukim. So first they start saying they're so strong, and Amalek is there, and these people, and then it says, Vayahas kalev ta'am el Moshe, vayomer alo na'alev yarash motak yachol nuchala. He gives a bit of a pep talk in the middle of their speech. And he says, no, we can do this. And then the people, Asher Alui Mo, that went with him, start saying, no, we can't. They're too strong for us. Okay, and then they start saying all these bad things. It's Eretz Ochelet Yoshveha, it eats its inhabitants. We're going to get to all these later. But there's something strange about this. It says, Vayahas Kalev et ha'am, which means he silenced them. He got them quiet. We'll have to see why you need to get them quiet. But it says El Moshe, to Moshe. What does that have to do with anything? What is Moshe here? It's really, he was talking to the people. So the drashot is the following. Amar Rabba, she sitan bidvarim. He tricked them using his words. Okay, this is like we said before. In order to get people to believe you, you have to do something, right? You have to be truthful in the beginning. He did a little bit of the opposite. He tried to get them quiet by being a little bit untruthful. Not exactly untruthful, but we'll see what he did. So again, this doesn't appear in the verses at all, but they're darshaning this, right? Often the drashot come and fill in with all sorts of things that happen behind the scenes that you don't see in the pasukim. But again, come from some struggle in the pasuk, something that doesn't make sense. First, even though we don't see this, Patach Yehoshua kamishta. Yehoshua got up to speak first, which also makes sense. He was more of the leader than Kalev was. Amrele, they said to him, right, kind of like throwing tomatoes at him, and they said, Dein rosh ketia yimalel, this cut off head is going to speak. Now, why was he a cut off head? He didn't have children. So what, this guy who doesn't have children, he's going to speak? That was their, horrible type of insult they threw at him. Basically, it wasn't because he didn't have children. They were just screaming at him because they didn't want to listen to what he had to say. So Kalev, Amal, he says to himself, well, if I start to talk like Yehoshua did, they're going to do the same thing. They'll say some insult they'll throw at me, and they'll shut me up, and no one's going to listen to me. So Amar Lehen, this all explains why he had to silence them, right? But the question is, why Moshe? What does that have to do with Moshe? So he starts with the following line to trick them. He wanted them to think that he was on the other side because they were clearly already siding with the spies. So he says, is this the only thing that Moshe did to us? Now, this could be understood in two ways. Is this the only thing, like, all Moshe did for us was this? Or is this the only thing? Moshe did so many more things for us. So he says this line that could be ambiguous, this ambiguous line. And with that, he basically gets them on his side because they think he's about to go insulting Moshe and say, this is all Moshe did for us? So they thought he was going against Moshe, which was perfect. That's the side they were on. Ishtiku, that silenced them. And that's why it says, Vayahas Kalev, you silenced them, El Moshe, on account of Moshe. Then, Amar Lahem, and then he continued to tell them, well, let's look at all the great things Moshe did for us. Hotzianu Mitzrayim, he took us out of Egypt, Kachalanu et Hayam, he split the sea, Hechilanu et Haman, this sounds like a list in Dayenu, right? So, and he gave us the man. Im Yomar, if Moshe told us, build a ladder and go up to the heavens, Lo Nishmalo, will we not listen to him? This guy did everything for us. Of course, we listened to anything he said. And therefore, now comes finally the words on the pasuk, Alona Alevi Arashno, we can do this. Right? And he got them to listen, but not for very long. Because then, but then come the other side and they start saying, we can't do this. They said something really great in a very bad way. What is it they say? They say we can't do it because he is greater than us. Now, that sounds weird. Don't read mimenu, read mimenu. Well, what they mean is it's not he's stronger than us. They're stronger than God. Even the owner, God who owns the world, if he left items there, obviously God doesn't leave items, but this is figuratively speaking, if God had left items there, he himself wouldn't have been able to take them out of there. That's how strong this nation is. So this is the first statement you're going to see, which really went directly against God, according to the Midrash, and we're going to see another one coming up. Then they say, Eretz Ochelet Yoshveha. It's a country that eats its inhabitants. It's a land that eats its inhabitants. Darash Rava, now you might remember why is this, because all these people were dying while they were there. Why were they dying? Well, Rava said, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu. God said, Ani chashavti l'tova v'hem chashavo l'ra'a. I thought this was a good thing. They looked at it as a bad thing. This is a good lesson, right? You can both two of us can look at the same thing, and if you're optimistic, you can look at it in a good way. If you're pessimistic, you can look at it in a negative way. Ani chashavti l'tova. I actually intended this, and for good reason. Why? Everywhere they got to, one of their important people in the city would die. So that everyone would be involved in burying that person, and they wouldn't ask questions. The spies would be able to get there, and no one would notice them because they'd be all busy dealing with this important person who died. Some people say, Eov is a character who isn't written exactly when Eov lived. Because of that, he lives in many different time periods and goes through all different things, and the Midrash likes to put him in all sorts of places. Perhaps it was Eov who died, and and the entire country, because he was such an important person, the entire country was busy dealing with his burial, and therefore it looked like there were tons of hespedim, eulogies going on. They thought it was 1 million people dying, but it was really only one person, and then it was just a misunderstanding of the spies. So again, Hem chashavu l'ra'ah, Eretz Ochelet Yoshveha, right? But they thought it was bad. Now they said, because they were so giant, we look like grasshoppers, right? We were in our mind compared to them like grasshoppers. And likewise, we were in their eyes viewed as grasshoppers. So the Gemara, Amar Rav Misharshia, Miraglim Shakrei Havu. They were clearly liars. Because Bishlam Avani Beinenu Kechagavim. We understand you could say, okay, we look like grasshoppers compared to them in our mind. But how would they possibly know what was going on in the minds of the inhabitants? How could they know that the other inhabitants thought they were grasshoppers? But in fact, what Rav Misharshia said is not true. They could have known what they thought of them. Why? When they were doing, called the Sudat Havra'ah, which is the meal you eat when getting back from burying someone, which according to the first version, there were a lot of those going on. Even the second version, right? You could say all the people coming back from Eov's funeral were also eating. They were doing it under these cedar trees. And when the people saw them coming, the spies saw them coming, they quickly ran up to the top of the tree to hide. They heard people saying, it looks like we see people up there that look like grasshoppers. So they were on top of the tree, right? They look like grasshoppers because they were far away from the people. So the people called them grasshoppers, but we were at the top of the spies were at the top of the tree, so they could hear what they were saying underneath. So it could be it was true. We don't know that this was true, but it's not necessarily a proof that they lied. You might have heard some of these midrashim already. Some of them are very well known. This is a very, very well-known one. Rashi quotes it in the Torah, right? That often makes midrashim famous because more people read Rashi than others, than other commentaries, or than opening the Midrash Rabbah, for example, or these Gemaras. Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Oto Yom Tisha B'Av Haya. So people then cried because they were all upset that what the spies said, and it was Tisha B'Av. Well, Amar Kadosh Baruch Hu, Hein Bachu B'Chiyah Shel Chinam. They cried for no reason because it was really not true what they were worried about. And I will give them a real reason to cry for generations on that same night. So because of that, they say the temple was destroyed on Tisha B'Av twice, right? And there's a famous Mishnah of the 5 things that happened on Tisha B'Av, and this is the first one, right? And obviously the 2 others are the destruction of the temple. So now they wanted to stone them. Okay, this is in 1 second. Right. And then they want to stone them. Now, there's something strange about the pasuk. Okay, they want to stone them. I assume it means, didn't really look this up so well, but I assume it means Yehoshua and Kalev, maybe even Moshe. Okay, they were very angry. But then the next words in the pasuk are very strange. It then says, and the presence of God was seen in Ohel Moed. What's the connection between those 2 things? The people want to stone the leaders, or whoever's saying, let's go to Israel. And on the other hand, we have the presence of God was seen in Ohel Moed. So this is similar to what we said before. They took stones and they threw them. They wanted to stone God, just like we saw before. They're stronger than God. This was all against God. But as opposed to, let's say, right, Korach is like who made you in charge, and it was really a leadership type of issue. This was directly against God. Perhaps it's coming to contrast it. I'm not sure. Now, the people the spies, the 10 spies who said bad things, they died in a plague. Amar Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish, shemetu mitam meshuna. Again, these drashot in general sound like the drashot we had in the beginning of the Masechet. If you remember, one of the main themes in the beginning of the Bar Masechet was midah keneged midah. Punishment is meted out as per your sin. So now they're going to say they died a strange death, according to Rabbi Shimon ben Lakish. Amar Rabbi Chanina ben Papa darash Rabbi Shila ish kvar tamarata. He's quoting someone who said this. Okay, their tongues kind of got elongated because they sinned with their mouths. So their tongues got really long, fell down to their tabul, their belly buttons. Then the worms were coming out of their tongues. Okay, they would go, because the worms were coming from the tongue to there, right? And exactly what I was thinking, exactly what you're saying, Becky, which is it sounds like the Sotah, right? This disgusting death that like creeps into your body, right? Gets into your insides. And that's how they died. For Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, okay, I don't know why he says this, but they died through diphtheria, okay, which was a kind of choking. You would choke from diphtheria, maybe also from the throat. Okay, we're done. Finished with the spies. We're not done with the daf. Finished with the spies. And now we're moving back to our topic. What was our topic? Crossing over the Jordan. But soon we're going to get off our topic. So now what happened? They crossed through the Jordan. If you remember, first the kohanim go in, carrying the aron. Now, we would have assumed what happens. The kohanim go, the water stops when the feet get in. And then you would have thought the kohanim start walking and the people start walking, but it's not what happened. Kohanim stood in their places. All the people passed them and went. And that's what we're going to see right now. And then when the last of the people go, which we're going to see are the kohanim, then the water goes back to the way it was. So, Shenema, how do we know this? When they get out of the Jordan, and they get the feet of the kohanim get to the ground, to the dry land. The waters go back to what they were. Basically, it looks like it was yesterday. So now, how did this work exactly? So what happened? As I said, the kohanim went in, the water stopped. Kohanim stay in place. Everybody goes to the other side of the Jordan. Once everybody gets to the other side of the Jordan, we have Yisrael on one side, and the kohanim are still on the other side. So now, right, imagine they're staying there. Now, people have gone a long time before them, right? They're still in their place. So now we need to kind of make up time, I guess. So now, as you don't want them to then start walking through the Jordan, that'll take a while. Again, it depends how wide the Jordan was over there. But what happens now? Apropos our conversation after class the other day. But in any case, they say, Nasa Aron et nosav ve'aval. A miracle happens, as if the water stopping wasn't right and rising up was not a miracle enough. Another miracle happens. The Aron carries all of the people that are left on that side, all the kohanim. The Aron kind of floats across in a miraculous manner and carries with it all the people. Okay, all the kohanim. Shenemal. Vahi kasher tam kol ha'am la'avor, vayavor Aron Hashem va'kohanim lifnei ha'am. Says after everybody went, then the Aron and the kohanim pass before the nation. So it's kind of like some miracle happened and they floated across and it landed on the other side of the people. So they're now in front like they were at the beginning. So they assume this happened in a miraculous way. And now we're going to get off topic. Okay? And this is what Uzzah was punished for. Who is Uzzah? Okay, Uzzah was, let's go back in history. Let's talk about the Aron, okay? Now we're getting into Aron Kodesh stories, okay? This is the basis for movies that you've seen, right? Raiders of the Lost Ark, and this is where it comes from, all these miraculous things about the Aron. So what do we have in the text? We have a story in Shmuel Aleph, where the beginning of Shmuel Aleph, this is very early on, the Aron gets captured by the Philistines, then bad things start happening, and they start to see these signs, they say, we don't want the Aron anymore. They send it back and they do this kind of test. If this happens, we know that the Jews are right, that we really have to send this back. They send it back. They don't even go with it. They're scared. They send it back and it goes to Beit Shemesh. Okay. And it stays in Beit Shemesh. Now, at that moment, we're going to get to this later. And I want to get you to get the chronology. Otherwise, it's super confusing, especially because some of the psukim are in Shmuel Aleph chapter 6 and some of them are in Shmuel Bet chapter 6. Okay. So don't get confused by it. And we're going to go a little out of order also. So the Aron stays in Beit Shemesh for a long time. And that's where the Aron was. Comes David, and he says, jumping forward now, okay, by the way, when the Aron came to Beit Shemesh, also a lot of Jews died. We're going to see how many and why did they die. That's going to be a discussion for today. So we're going to talk about that. That's at the first stage when it gets to Beit Shemesh. Then later, David says it's time to move it back to its place in Jerusalem. So they move it to Jerusalem, but what happens? David puts it on a wagon, and we're going to learn that he shouldn't have done that. Okay, maybe I'll give you all the background so that when we get to it, you'll see. Because the Levites were commanded in the desert to carry it, not to put it in wagons, but to put it on their shoulders. So, but they carry it on a wagon. Uzzah sees that it's about to fall. He's nervous it's going to fall. And he says he grabs it so it doesn't fall. And he gets punished because that was not the right thing to do. We're going to see now that he forgot that the Aron has a miraculous nature about it. There's no way it's going to fall. If it could float across the water, it obviously isn't going to fall off the wagon. So that was his mistake. We're going to see later why David was also partially responsible for this mistake. And that you can already guess because he shouldn't have put it on a wagon. He should have carried it on the shoulders. That was his mistake. Okay, I'm just kind of giving you all the kind of giving away the punchlines of today, but it'll help you as we go through the psukim. Then, because Uzzah gets killed, David decides we're not bringing the Aron today. Not a good day. He basically puts it in the house of Oved Edom HaGiti. He was from Gat. They put it in his house. He starts to be blessed. Okay, Rashi says all of his wife, his daughters-in-law, and the daughters all started having sextuplets. Okay, I'm not sure that's the biggest bracha. I don't know who was helping them take care of all these babies, but okay, that was considered a blessing because they were blessed with lots of children. After 3 months, he realizes that the Aaron is bringing bracha. God must not be angry anymore, and he decides to bring it to Jerusalem. And then they do it the right way. We're going to talk about all this today. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so now we have, this is why Uzzah gets punished. Shene'emar v'yavo ad goren kidon. We'll come back to this kidon. Okay, kidon, by the way, was in the Chidon Tanakh. If you watch the Chidon Tanakh, it was one of the last questions. Not here. It was actually talked about in Eov. What animal goes with a kidon in Eov? Hard question. Now, kidon means a javelin. Okay, we're going to get to this later. So they get to the goren of the javelin. Vayishlach Uzzah et yado le'echos et Aaron, and he goes to grab the Aaron. Okay, this is the description in Divrei Hayamim, I believe. Yeah, 1 second. Let me just check which pasuk we're in. Yeah, this is the description in Divrei Hayamim. Okay, now if you don't know this, in Sefer Shmuel and Melachim, there's a lot of parallels in Divrei Hayamim, and sometimes there's contradictions between them. It's like similar stories, differences. Okay, there's a whole lot to be said there. We're going to deal with some of the contradictions today. So then he goes to grab the Aaron, and then basically he dies right there. Okay, he dies. We're going to talk about that after. If you could carry the people who carried it, what, you think you can't carry it itself? What were you worried about? It was going to fall. He gets very angry. What is this? Alashal. It's a very strange word. Rabbi Yochanan and Rabbi Elazar, they have a debate about it. Chadamar al iskei shalu, which means on shkagot, forget mistakes. Okay, he made a mistake. He forgot this whole story about the Jordan. V'chadamar shasat rachav b'fanav. One explained that it means, now there's different ways to understand this. Either he urinated in front of it. Now that would be weird. Why would he even think to do that? Some people say that what it means is he urinated not far away enough, right? You shouldn't urinate in the presence of it. Maybe he did it on the side, but it was close enough that it was embarrassing. It was not proper kavod. Some people say asat rachav, right? We say it in our davening in the morning, which means I put on my shoes, and he put his shoes on in front. It's like a way of saying couldn't possibly be he urinated in front of it. Anyway, he did something. We're not sure what. Okay, the first interpretation matches what we've seen in Talmud. Vayamat sham im Aron ha'Elohim. That's a very strange thing. He died there with the Aron. Now, what I assume they mean is right on account of the Aron. But the way they understand this is, despite the fact that we have a lot of negative to say about him, he actually makes it to Olam Haba. How do we know? Because it says he died with the Aron. The Aron is always there. He actually made it into the world to come. All different reasons why. Maybe what he did wasn't so bad. Maybe, he had good intentions, even though he did it wrong. We don't know exactly, but he makes it into Olam Haba. Now it says in the pasuk in Shmuel Bet, David was angry. Now, vayichal usually means, right? Vayichal af, it usually comes. It means he was angry. But Amar Rabbi Elazar, why vayichal? Shenishtanu panav kechavara. His face changed like a cake. What happens to a cake? It gets very dark when you put it in the oven. His face darkened, meaning he was responsible also for this. That's what I told you. El me'ata. So first they say, before they even get to why did his face turn dark from this, and that it wasn't that he got angry at Uzzah, he was kind of really upset with himself. He was responsible. El me'ata kol echad tichti vayichar hachanami. Hachanami, you want to say every time it says vayichal, it means the person was responsible. If you get angry at someone, that means you're responsible. First of all, that matches what we saw in the beginning of the Masechet. Husband gets angry and his wife is jealous, and it's really his fault. So to a certain extent, there is some reference to something like this, but the Gemara doesn't really like this. They say no, hatam k'tiv af, hachalok k'tiv af. Usually, and like we saw before, vayichar af Hashem. God got angry at him. But here it just says vayichar. So because it just says vayichar without the af, which means vayichar af is anger, vayichar could be he was also responsible. Tarash Rava. So Rava explains, Mipnei ma ne'anash David, what was he punished for? Mipnei shekara l'divrei Torah zmirot. He called divrei Torah zmirot. Zmirot is something you take lightly, right? We sing zmirot. We're sometimes paying attention to the words, we're sometimes not. It's a song. It's not the same way you treat the Torah. How do we know this? Shanema, we're going to quote a pasuk from Tehillim, which is attributed to David HaMelech. Zmirot hayu lichukecha bebeit migurai. The laws in my home were to me like smirot. So here you see the Torah treated like smirot. That's a negative thing. Amar lo Kadosh Baruch Hu. God says to him, Divrei Torah shekatuv b'hem ha'te'if einecha bo ve'einenu. About Divrei Torah, which it says if you move your mind off of it for a second, it will disappear. You will forget everything you learned. You're going to call them smirot and not treat them with the proper respect. I'm going to make you sin on something that even the little children in school, everybody knows this. Why does everyone know it? Because whenever it's a pasuk in the Torah, we assume all the kids know this. Unfortunately, not true in our day, but right. I always think of those, are you smarter than a fifth grader game, right? In other words, the kids, because they're learning things in school, they remember all the things. They also have a better memory usually than us. Okay, you have to read the rest of the pasuk. They didn't give it to Bnei Kahat because it was avodat kodesh. Okay, alehem b'katef yisau. In other words, they weren't given wagons to carry the aron because it was avodat kodesh. They took it on their shoulders, and even the little kids know that pasuk. And David messed up, and that was because he treated the Torah as mirot. So God made it that he was going to mess up on something very basic for not taking the Torah seriously and having what we call hasei chadat, not paying attention a little bit, and that already ruined his ability to remember this. Now what happens? Now we're going back. Okay, this was, as I told you, Shmuel Bet. Now we're going all the way back to Shmuel Aleph with the Aron the first time when it gets taken away and the Plishtim send it back. So when it gets back to Beit Shemesh, Vayachban she Beit Shemesh kira'u ba'aron, it says the people in Beit Shemesh get killed because they saw the Aron, to which the Gemara says, Mishum dira'u vayach, what? I don't understand. They saw the Aron, so God punished them? That seems a little bit strange just by looking. Well, Rabbi Yaval, Rabbi Elazar, again, we're going to have a debate between these two rabbis. Chad amar kutzlim u'mishtachavim ayu, which Rashi explains to me. They were busy working when the Aron came, and they kind of looked at it and moved on with their work and didn't give it the proper kavod, the proper respect. The other one says they also said disrespectful words. What did they say? They saw the Aron coming back. Now remember, the Aron wasn't with them for a little while, so they said, turning now to Amud Bet, Man amarayach ti marayata. Okay, so the Gemara, Rashi explains this. Who mihichascha who got angry? Who got you angry that you didn't use? If you have special powers, you could have come back on your own. Why did you stay in captivity? Uman ata alayh, and why all of a sudden now did you decide to come back? Right? It's like being angry at someone that they left you for so long, right? Why did you leave? And when you could have come back, and now that you're coming back, like, why are you coming back now? So it could be that they even spoke disrespectfully to the Aron. And that's why they died. How many people died? Bayach ba'am, and here there's a mistake in the text here. It should be shiv'im ish, 70 people. Chamishim elef ish. There's no vav there in the pasuk. Okay, it's 70 people, 5, and then 50,000 people. Now, normally when you write that number, you write 70 and 50,000. But it says 70,000, 50,000. So they say, first of all, it's a huge number of people. It seems crazy that so many people would have died. Well, Rabbi Yaval and Rabbi Elazar again disagree about how to understand this. There were 70 people, but they were such prominent people that each one was like 5,000 people. It didn't really have that many people die. The other one says, no, it's the opposite. It was 50,000 people. But they were all equal to the 70 elders, like the 70 in the Sanhedrin. Okay, and that they were each like 70. So either it was 70 that were like 50,000, or it was 50,000 that were like 70. Okay, and it's all a way of, number one, grappling with the pasuk and the wording that doesn't sound right, and number two, dealing with was it really that many people. So one actually says it really was that many people. Obviously minus 70. Okay, now we're jumping forward, and this is why I gave you all the history before, otherwise it's impossible to follow. Then 3 months later, after it was in Oved Edom HaGiti's house, and things were good, and they were having sextuplets and all these great things, they were having bracha. Okay, obviously it doesn't say in the text about the sextuplets, it's a midrash about what they saw that was a bracha. So they start to see that things are better, and they decide to, David decides, I'm bringing the Aron now to Jerusalem. So while they brought it to Jerusalem this time, they wanted to do it right. So first of all, they put it on their shoulders. And it says, so the Nosei Aron would do Shishat Sa'adim, and then it says, Vayizbach Shor Umeri. Okay, can someone help me? I forget what Meri is. Okay. But basically they slaughter an ox, and a fattened animal. Okay, fine. A shore and a marie, so an ox and a fattened animal, probably like a fattened sheep. So basically, every 6 steps, they would sacrifice this. But what's the problem? There's contradictory pasuk. Again, I told you, Shmuel and Divrei Yamin, there's often contradictions. This is in Shmuel Bet. And in Divrei Yamin, it says, Uchtiv shiv'a parim v'shiva elim. In the description of bringing it back to Jerusalem, it says they sacrifice 7 parim, 7 oxen or bulls, and 7 rams. So how does this work? 7 or 2 and 2 every 6 steps. What exactly happened? Amar Papa Bashmo. Al kol psial psia shor meri. Al kol shesh v'shesh psial shiva parim v'shiva elim. He says it depends. Every step was one thing. Every 6 steps was another. Now, what he does something is very interesting. He does a crisscross because he takes where it said about 6 steps, right? One pasuk didn't say anything about 6 steps. It just said 7 animals. The other one said 6 steps. So you would think, right? The one that says nothing means every step. But that says every step they did 7. And the one that says every 6 steps, they only did 2 animals, right? Sorry, 7 of each, 14. The one who says it was 2 basically says every 6 steps. So they say it doesn't make any sense, though. Rav Papa says it doesn't make any sense that every 6 steps they would do, that every 1 step they would do 14, and every 6 steps they would do 2. You would think the exact opposite. So they basically do a crisscross of the psukim and put that there and that there. And with that, they get to his answer. What are you doing? You're going to have a sick amount of animals. There's no way they did that. You're going to fill up the whole country with animals. So, goes back to the simple reading, Rav Chisda, and he says, each 6 steps, it was shor mari, as the pasuk in the Shmuel says. What do we do with the Divrei Yamin pasuk that says there's 14? Al kol shishat starim shel shesh psiot shiva parim v'shiva elim. Every 6, it's right. Every 6 times they did 6 steps. On the 6 after the 6 times they would do 7 parim and 7 elim, and that was how you resolve the problem. And then you end up with a lot less animals. It's still a ton of animals, but at least a little bit less. Tiv kidon, I told you we get back to this word kidon, which is I told you means a javelin. Uchtiv nachon. Now you have to read these psukim, otherwise it makes no sense. So again, Divrei Yamim, Shmuel Bet. Shmuel Bet, it says, Vayavo agoren nachon, and then Uzzah puts out his hand, grabs the aron, and dies. And then it says in Divrei Yamim, Vayavo agoren kidon, vayishlach Uzzah et yado, etc. The exact same pasuk, it's just one calls it nachal kidon, and one calls it nachal nachon. Now nachon is usually things are good and solid. So, Amar Rabbi Yochanan b'tchilat kidon ulevasof nachon. First, the aron had the effect of a javelin because it killed Uzzah. Later, even though the pasuk is talking about when Uzzah does it, but what they're talking about, they reference what's going to be later, which is in the house of Oved Edom HaGiti, things are nachon, and it was good. So it shows that the aron can go both ways depending on how it's treated. Okay, we're done now with our second tangent for today. We started with our first tangent that we were on already from yesterday about the spies. We then got back to the Jordan. While we were talking about the Jordan and the miraculous nature of how the aron floated through, carrying the kohanim with it, that's why Uzzah gets punished. And from there, we had all these discussions about the aron. Now we're back to our stones. Now they say there were 3 sets of stones. We're now going to talk about a new set we haven't seen before. Moshe in the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, Moshe is standing in the land of Moab, opposite entry into the land. Obviously, he's not going to go there. He must have put up his own stones. Never talks about it in the Torah. Where do we get it from? Well, it says in the beginning of Sefer Dvarim, he explained the Torah. Remember that? It doesn't say this in they don't quote the whole pasuk, but that's the important part. Yehoshua is supposed to write the Divrei Torah, be'er hitei. From there, we learned that he had to write in 70 languages. Today, we're going to learn why. What was the purpose of writing the Torah there and writing it in 70 languages? In any case, we'll get back to that. But because it says be'er there and it was with stones, also by Moshe, it must have been stones when it says be'er. So he must have put up stones in Moab. Ba'atya be'er be'er, and therefore they darshan gezira shava of be'er be'er. Yehoshua b'toch hayarden, and then there was the one we talked about these already, that where the kohanim were standing, right? They took the stones and and they set them up, right? In the Jordan, and that's in case your sons ask you later. Children ask you, what are these stones? You'll tell them about this great miracle that God passes through the Jordan. And this is the one we're going to deal with now, Shekim beGilgal, the ones they put up in Gilgal, which again, they took to Harival, they used it as an altar, then they dismantled the altar, then they wrote on it all the Torah in 70 languages, they put limestone on. We're going to talk about the order. We're going to have a debate when the limestone was put on, before or after they wrote the Torah. And then they brought them back all the way to Gilgal. Okay, they took them from the Jordan, they brought them to Harival, used it as an altar, dismantled, wrote the Torah, put limestone, again, we'll talk about the order, and brought them back. Tanu Rabbanan. So now the Braita comes, Ketzad Katvu Yisrael et Torah. How was it written? Here's our question. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Al Gabei Avanim Ktavua. They wrote it straight on the stone, etched it into the stone. Shneimar. V'katavta al avanim et kol divrei Torah hazot. Sounds like it was on the stone. Ba'achar kach sadu oto b'seed. Then they put the limestone on over. Now try to imagine. You have words, you put limestone on, you can't read anything. So Amar Rabbi Shimon lidvarecha hach lamdu umot haolam Torah. Yeah, fascinating. All of a sudden, we're bringing the other nations. The purpose of these stones was obviously to teach the other nations the Torah. This is what I call part 2 of the famous midrash we all learn on Shavuos, which is God came to all the nations and said, you want the Torah? And they said, what's written in it? Don't murder. Oh, I can't do that. What's written in it, right? The famous, and that they didn't want the Torah. This is part 2, because now that was before the Torah was given. Now, once the Torah is given, God wants to make it known, here's our Torah. So he tells the Jews, write the Torah in all the languages so that they'll learn and so that they'll hopefully decide to go, right, either do the 7 Noachide laws or maybe become Jewish, right? We want them to learn the right way to live. So how are they going to learn it if you cover it with seed? Obviously, the purpose of writing in 70 language wasn't for us. It was for people who didn't understand these languages, for the other nations. Amarlo, Binai Teran, Natam HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So Rabbi Yehuda explains, no, they were very insightful, very knowledgeable. Shiglu no teron shalahem, they sent their sofrim, their scribes, tilfu et hasid, they peeled off the limestone, bisiua, and then they carried it away with them. What did they carry away with them? Well, then, because it was etched in the stone, they kind of took, I don't know what, a parchment, something, put ink, put it on the stone, got the words on, and then with that, they took that with them, and they were able to learn the Torah. And because of that, and that's why they end up getting destroyed. Why? Because they knew the Torah, right? They had the opportunity, but they didn't learn it. So it seems a little more complicated, according to this version, for the Gentiles to learn the Torah. They had to go through some whole process in order to get it. And maybe this is what we call amala Torah. You have to work for it a little bit. And that's how they got it. But Rabbi Shimon doesn't think that. Rabbi Shimon, no, first they did the limestone, then they etched it into the stone. And then he adds this other thing, which is a fascinating topic. Etc. This is a pasuk in Torah which says, so that you don't learn to do like the other nations, and therefore we have to destroy the 7 nations. Right? When you get into the land, we're commanded to completely wipe out the 7 nations. The big deliberation among people, like how could we just be commanded to wipe out entire nations? What if they're not? What if they're innocent? Right? It's a big, big question. Well, according to this, now there's 2 ways to read this. It's very important. They write this line. Why? They write this line at the bottom to kind of, it's like we would say nowadays, we bold it. Okay. Why do we bold it? So that they see that they have an opportunity to be choser b'tshuva. The simple reading sounds like, at least at this point in the sugya, we'll see our last line today maybe seems to indicate otherwise, that if someone from the 7 nations decides to become Jewish or, go in the right way, there's a debate whether we mean no chai laws or actually really fully Jewish, they can. You don't have to destroy them then. That is the opinion of the Rambam and the Ramban. Rashi, however, does not understand it that way. And Rashi says, and you'll see where he bases this, and later on in the sugya, we're almost there, but that it's only people who are Canaanite background or all the other 7 nation background, but live outside of Israel. Now, why these stones are written in Israel, but the assumption is that they come visiting and they see this, they'll know that they can convert. But only ones who live outside. Ones inside must be destroyed no matter what. So it's a very interesting debate in terms of our struggles with, how could we totally wipe out and destroy people if they're necessarily, let's say they want to convert. So the Rambam and the Ramban say actually they can, okay? But Rashi doesn't think they can. So now, the simple reading here again sounds like we're talking about the 7 nations. If they want to do tshuva, they can. Amar Rabbi Shila, my time at Rabbi Shimon, what's his reason? why he says that they first put the seed, then wrote the Torah, besides the reason that he said already, otherwise how are they going to read the Torah? Okay, they now both darshan this pasuk, which is a pasuk in Yeshayahu, about the other nations. They're going to be burnt from seed. Now, what does it mean from seed? On account of seed, aliskei seed, because of the Torah that was written on the seed. That's why they're going to be burned, because they didn't keep the Torah when they saw it. It was right there in front of them, and they didn't read it. Rabbi Yehuda has to read that pasuk differently, because not because of the seed, it's because of what was written on the stones. It was under the seed. So Rabbi Yehuda explains it totally differently. Ki seed, like limestone. Mas seed ein lo takana l'sreifad. The only way to fix it is to burn it. Afu mod haolam ein lem takana l'sreifad. The only way to fix them is to burn them. Okay, this is again once they're in a bad place, right? There's no way out. Timan az lahad detanya v'shavita shivyo. So now we're going to end with this last line. According to is the following bright. Now you're going to see in a minute that the opportunity to do tshuva, particularly in this line, is going to be only for those living outside the city, outside the country. Okay, which is going to match Rashi's interpretation. Whether how the Rambam and the Ramban read it is a good question. Maybe they just think these aren't necessarily, it's not the only way. But anyway, they're talking about an Eshet Yifat Torah, which first of all only happens in Milchemet Reshut, which is you're going out to war, not because you're conquering the land, okay, which means we're not talking about people in the land. So if you go out to war, Reshut means you don't have to go to war. It's not a commandment to go to war, but you decide to go to war to conquer some nation. And you find this beautiful woman, what you're supposed to do, it's a whole complicated sugya. Anyway, it says there, V'shavita shivyo, and you capture people. And it says further on, V'ra'ita b'shivya, and you see in the people you capture this beautiful woman and you want to be with her. So what do you do in this whole process? Not going to get into it today, but if it says you see in the captives, then obviously you took captives. So you don't have to say V'shavita shivyo, that you took captives, because it's obvious from the next pasuk you took captives. So what does it come to add? L'rabot knanim shebachutz la'aretz. Now, obviously, you end up with this woman in the end. If you go through all process, you can actually marry her. So they say, this is talking about Canaanites that are outside the land of Israel. If they're chozrim b'tshuva, you can accept them. So according to does this go? Keman ke Rabbi Shimon. This matches Rabbi Shimon, who said we put that line down there to encourage them to convert. It's not exactly saying the exact same thing, but and especially if you're the Rambam and the Ramban, who think it's for the nation's inhabitants, it's definitely much more complicated. This definitely supports Rashi, even though the simple reading before he didn't say anything about people outside the land, did sound like it was 7 nations in the land. Anyway, we have this machloket about the seed, which order did it go, and did they write this big line at the bottom, like Rabbi Shimon says, or not, to encourage people to convert. Okay, quick review of the daf. We started with all these drashot on the miraglim. Okay, in the summary of today's daf, I listed all the different things, so I'm not going to go through them right now. If you want, you can read them over to just get an idea. Right, the summary you can find, and the podcast details are on our website. Then we went back to the Jordan. We talked about how the Aron carried them across. Then we talked about all the stories about the Aron, and we went through and what effects it had. And then we went back to these 3 stones, and then we talked really about the third set and how was it done and what was the purpose of them. Okay, with that, we'll finish for today. We'll pick up from here tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone.